Welcome to the February program for the Sangamon County Historical Society. This is Stephanie, the president of the society. We are looking at the Shine a Light project, 3 important African American historic sites on the east side of Springfield. Today we have Kathryn Harris, historian, librarian, and community leader, and Sue Massie, landscape architect with Massie and Massie. And they are both Sangamon County Historical Society members. So thank you very much for joining us today. So we're going to learn a little bit more about your project that you're involved in. Can one of you tell me about the project, how it got started?
Well, I might just begin by talking about my involvement with these sites. I got involved with the Lincoln, the Judge John Wycliffe Taylor House about 7 years ago. I was involved with some other people who were interested in historic sites, and I can describe a little bit more how that occurred later. But that gradually added to an interest in other significant African American sites on the Near East Side of Springfield, and led to the idea of developing some historical information, documentation, and possibly a tour of those sites during warmer weather and non-COVID conditions. We know that will happen sometime soon.
Okay, well, my involvement came because I live in the neighborhood. I live close to all 3 of the sites. I live immediately across from the firehouse. So the firehouse has always been of interest to me since I moved into this neighborhood, I think in 1983. And I always wanted to know more about it. And being the librarian that I am, I made it my business to learn about it. And then the Lincoln Colored Home, my librarian instincts kicked in there again. So I learned about Eva Monroe and the work that she did with the Lincoln Colored Home. And then I was curious about the Judge Taylor Home, which I first learned about as the Ambidexter Institute. And I just liked the sound of that. I just like that particular phrase, because when I think of ambidexter, you know, people being ambidextrous, they can use both of their hands. And that was the function of the Industrial Institute, it was a school to learn a trade. And then it also had some other roles over time. But being a librarian and a historian, so to speak, at least I have a love of history. And having worked at the Illinois State Historical Library that became the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library, I was just properly placed to learn all kinds of things about Springfield. So, and I have done that, I think.
I think one thing that's interesting is you'll see on this map, the Lincoln Home National Historic Site is labeled here. Just to the west, a few blocks really of these sites. These are all part of the Near East Side and close to the downtown. The John Taylor House, for instance, I calculated as 7 blocks, just walking distance from Lincoln Home, and then the downtown. The Colored Home's even closer, and the first Black Firehouse. But these are sites that have been here for over 100 years, some of them more. And people don't even know they're here.
Right.
You know, probably most of the white people in town have never heard of these places or seen the sites. And a lot of Black people don't either. So the idea of this project, Shine a Light, was to give them some attention so people began realizing they were here, learned their history, and somehow learn to work together to save such important places in our community.
I will add about saving certain places in our community. I hope I'm not jumping the gun, because the Lincoln Colored Home is on the National Register for Historic Places. And the city owes a great deal. Maybe I shouldn't talk about that right now. The city owes a great deal to Babs Dickerman for the work that she did to actually save that property.
We'll see more about that in later slides.
Right.
So how did this committee form, and who else is on the committee for the project?
Well, we first got together, Kathryn, it was a year and a half ago.
Has it been that long?
And it, what?
I said, has it really?
Seemed at least that long ago.
Yeah.
And what we tried to do was get people who were involved with each of these places to sit down together, find out what each was doing, talk about what we could do together to get attention to these sites, and how we were going to do it. So who was involved? Ken Page from the First Black Firehouse. He's been involved in that project for years, number of years. Right. Lincoln Colored Home, there's a woman who was working on it at the time, who was involved at that point. Kathryn, remind me of who that was.
I know that Erica Austin.
It's Erica, yes. Yeah.
With some young men from, I think they were seniors in, I think most of them went to Springfield High School, and they did it because she was involved with the 4-H. That's what it was. It was 4-H. Yes. And when you think of 4-H, you often think of rural, but she was very much involved with the 4-H extension in Springfield. And that's how interest grew in the Lincoln Colored Home.
And Erica and her group were instrumental in getting a large interpretive sign placed in the front of the building.
Right.
And in promoting its preservation.
Right.
And then as far as the Taylor House, Tim Rolls is president of the Springfield project.
Right.
Let me start on that. And the Taylor House is owned by the Springfield project, which Tim Rawls heads up at this point. So those were mainly the people involved at that point. And we talked about what each of us was doing, and got some good ideas from one another about how to promote property, where funds might be available. And we talked about doing this Shine a Light project, which was to do a little more research on all of these, to document it in a booklet, and then to have a tour of each of these sites in the spring. Now, whether we can do that or not because of COVID is a little up in the air, but we thought that would be a great opportunity. We'd have a person stationed at each place, and as people came around to each of the spots, someone would be there to talk about the place, give history, and just get people interested in and excited about it.
All right, thank you. Why don't we talk about each of the sites?
Okay.
I'll start with a little bit of information about the first Black firehouse. The property is currently uh, owned and managed by the Central Lodge number 3 of the Prince Hall Masons. Ken Page has been at one point the worshipful master of the lodge, and he thought that he would try to get funding to do some upgrade, to do some renovations, and try to restore the firehouse as to what it looked like when it was truly operational. Okay, and there's some of the firefighters who worked there, and at that time, there were horse-drawn carriages. Um, the firehouse is in the 1300 block of Adams, so it is east of 11th Street. Now, back in the day when the firehouse was operational, the Black firehouse served the east side of Springfield, literally the east of 11th Street. 11th Street is kind of a dividing line uh, for the city. And being all honest, it was a dividing line pretty much for Black community, white community. Even though I must add, in the first decade of the 20th century, the east side of Springfield was not only Black, but there were ethnic minorities, Italians, Germans, people of Jewish heritage, all lived on the east side. It was not as totally African American as it is today. And this firehouse served properties on the east side. I think we have some more slides. So, was built in, okay. One of the things that the Masons hope to do is to restore it to what it probably may have looked like when it was at its heyday. And you can notice that there would be another entrance where another fire truck or a horse-drawn cart might have been, and the facade. But the work that is representative for the current facade is greatly improved from what it was before the Masons got involved in it. So it's made a tremendous improvement in our community, and it's all a good thing now.
This is the sign that's outside the building now that gives a little history, talks about what happened here. I think it does explain that this was the firehouse that responded to the race riots of 1908, right. Which is pretty notable. The Black Firehouse and Ken Page are really the organizers of this Shine a Light project. They applied for a grant from the Community Foundation of the Land of Lincoln and received a modest amount of money to put this program together.
And you will notice that the interpretive sign that is in front of the building is from the Sangamon County Historical Society, which is a good thing.
Yeah. Yep. We can see that right here.
Right.
Good point. Anything else?
I can add that one thing that I've noticed, because I live right across the street, I am impressed when just John Q. Public pedestrian walking down the sidewalk sees that sign, stops, takes a minute to read it, and you know how people have like an aha moment? It's like, oh, I didn't know that. And so the sign has brought a lot of attention to the firehouse, and that's all good in helping us learn more about our own history right here in Springfield.
The next site is the Judge John Wycliffe Taylor, and I guess I'll talk about that since I'm know more about this than the other places. A couple of photographs of the building in its heyday. This is built as a single family residence for a judge moving to the community. He acquired about 3 acres and built this house, which was outside the city limits at the time. The city hadn't been platted in this area yet. Eventually, it did become the Ambidexter Institute for Black children, as Kathryn mentioned. And I think this is just a wonderful picture of the class. We aren't sure quite what year it is, but great image. Before it became the Ambidexter Institute, though, it was purchased 12 years after it was constructed by several families, community-minded families in Springfield that formed the Ulrich Home for Fallen Women. And this, of course, was a time when women that were pregnant out of wedlock were shunned and weren't part of the community. So this was the home to take care of them. Records show that within the first 5 years, they had served over 300 women and children in this home. After a time, that stopped, and it was in the early 1900s that the Ambidexter Institute was begun. And this was modeled after the Tuskegee Institute by Washington, Booker T. Washington, and followed a lot of the concepts with not only classes for the arts and sciences, but they had choirs and they had extracurricular activities for the children. It must have been a wonderful place to go to school. It's said that that was guarded by, during the race riots, by troops that were in the community. It lasted not a whole lot of years. It was difficult finding funds to keep it going. And the owners of the school would travel through the Midwest and the South, trying to recruit donations and help to keep it going. But after a time, it did close. It was converted to apartments, and eventually it was acquired by Save Old Springfield, an organization that Jerry Jacobson started. And he kept it standing for quite a few years, made improvements that were necessary. And then eventually it was acquired by the Springfield project, as I mentioned before. That project, and I worked with them on that, made substantial improvements in the building. We spent about $50,000 to improve it, although there's much more that needs to be done. This is how it looks when we acquired it. It had had a demolition order. The city was requiring the owner to demolish it, or they were moving in the following week. It came that close to being gone. You can see the piles of garbage and trash that had been dumped here. That was to be the backfill for the hole left after the demolition. Over here, piles of dirt and debris and hunks of concrete as big as driveways, all just thrown there. It was really sad at that point. So one of the things the Springfield project did was remove asbestos shingles from the facade of the building. It had transite shingles all around. So that's a specialized process to remove that safely, follow state regulations on that. We had volunteer people there doing what they could. So this is my husband and neighbor Howard and some neighbor kids that helped through one summer. This is a sketch of how it could look with the building renovated and the vacant lots to the south of it used as a community or neighborhood park, an artist concept. But just to finish out that segment, we don't know what's going to happen to it in the future, but we haven't given up on trying to find resources and energy to preserve it in its current condition.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll talk about the Lincoln Colored Home, since that is the slide that is showing right now, as it appeared in about 1904. The Lincoln Colored Home is, as I mentioned earlier, on the National Register for Historic Sites. And at one time, it was on a list for the 10 most endangered, among the 10 most endangered sites in the state of Illinois by Landmarks Preservation Council. As I mentioned, Babs Dickerman, who was a community activist and very active in the NAACP and very involved in matters, she was just a good citizen in our community. She took it up on herself to do the research to get the house listed, and that is how it is saved, how it was saved. And so we owe her a debt of gratitude. The Lincoln Colored Home was a home for children. Eva Carroll Monroe was the matron, I suppose would be the title she would hold, the superintendent of the home, and she's here with her sisters. Eva Carroll Monroe was born in Kewanee and moved to Springfield. I don't know exactly what year, but she was appointed to be the caretaker for the children who stayed at the Lincoln Colored Home. The, pardon me, interest in the home grew because people would pass by, and a lot of people didn't know what it was. It's at 12th and Jackson. It's like right across the street, literally almost, from Lincoln School. And it's, you have to go around that little roundabout thing to get to it now, but it stands there. Currently, and in recent weeks and months, there has been a construction fence put around it, I think for safety's sake. And there has been renewed interest in the home, thanks to some work that Mary Francis, a local documentarian, did a lot of research and developed a DVD that tells the history of the home. Mary Lawrence, who was the mother of Susan Lawrence Dana of Dana Thomas House fame, was interested in financing a new home for children, and the house was built with leftover bricks from the Lawrence School. And Lawrence School is now the Lawrence Adult Education Center that's on Laurel, I think the street that it's on. And if you go into the library in the school, you will see the library in the Lawrence Adult School is very beautiful. It is quite attractive because there are reflections of not reflections. It's in the style, the prairie style of Frank Lloyd Wright. In 1933, the home closed. And that in itself is a kind of sad commentary about Eva Monroe. Eva Monroe was not college educated, but the house played an important part because African American children were not welcomed and were not served if they were orphans by, quote, the white orphanages. And so where were the children to go? So that's how the house came to be in the first place, because the African American orphans and even older women, especially who had no family to care for them, were residents in the house. Eva had no college, no social service credentials, and that is sadly what caused the house to close. However, there was and all of the services that had been developed for the children, the quote, colored children at the home, were under the auspices of the Sangamon County Children's Service, the Bureau of Sangamon County Negro Services Bureau. And today that's part of the Family Service Center. So if by chance, for example, you have a relation who might have been a resident at the Lincoln Colored Home, you can go to the Family Service Center and with permission, get an opportunity to see their records, which are stored at the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library. But you have to have permission to see them. So, do you have any questions or comments about the home? But
Thank you, Kathryn. I didn't know that about the records. That's very interesting.
oh, good. Yes, I remember when I worked at the library, we would get calls from relatives, you know, because they had heard that their great grandmother or whatever had been a resident there, and where do you go to look? Because they are not at the Illinois State Archives, because that's where state records are kept, and these are private county records. So these are uniquely kept at the Family Service Center, which is at 7th and South Grand.
You have any idea how many children were served at that facility over the years?
I must say, I do not know the answer to that, but I'm a librarian, so I know where I can look.
I've read at times they had a lot of people that they were helping there, up to 70, but then a more reasonable, manageable number was maybe 20 or 30.
The 30 is like the average number that I have seen in reading, but the capacity could have been more than that at times because the need was great. Where were the children and folks who had no one to care for them to go, in all honesty, during Jim Crow days and racial segregation? So the need was immense. The Lincoln Colored Home may very well have been the first orphanage for African American children in the United States. It's said that it is, but I've never been able to confirm that it is or that it isn't. So I think for Springfield, we'll just claim it.
All right, thank you. Very interesting, all those sites. So you mentioned a little bit earlier about some funding that you received, but did you want to say anything more about other fundraising efforts that are underway or that you've received as this Shine a Light project?
You know, our objective with this project was just really a first step of trying to show people what's out there, what needs to be preserved, talk to them, get their interest. Hopefully that could lead to applications for grants, to private donations, to organizations that might adopt or at least assist in some preservation work. These sites are hard to get attention and funding for. I know Ken has done a great job and has found funds in a couple locations to stabilize and improve the first Black firehouse. The Taylor House, you know, the Springfield project has taken it on and tried to make it a focus for potential redevelopment of the Near East Side, redevelopment of housing and facilities on the Near East Side. That's been a difficult objective to meet. The city has attempted to find funds in various locations and still is, I might add. But you know, I just have to say we're casting about to see what we can find and try to draw people's interest in.
The Lincoln Colored Home is privately held, and to work to get that done, we would have to work in conjunction with the family that owns that particular structure. And they would have to get permissions and be the instigator or the applicant for any funds. And that is not progressing as well as we would like at this time.
Okay, thank you. With your upcoming brochure and tour, is that going to be you get the brochure when you go on the tour, or are you going to distribute the brochure at other places around town or online?
Well, I think that hasn't been decided. If the tour can't be done this spring or in the foreseeable future, I think getting the brochure out to people in a different way at different venues would be really advantageous. If there is a tour, that'd probably be something that was at least first distributed during that event.
Right.
And that tour may include, in addition to viewing these houses, walking about, seeing them, learn about them, is a reception at the end, possibly at the firehouse, where people could gather, talk about ideas, and even have invited guests there demonstrating different renovation, talking about other projects, just developing some energy toward the restoration efforts.
Great. And do you have any other plans for the future of the Shine a Light project?
I'm not sure we can look beyond that right now, Stephanie.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's great.
Can you look beyond it, Kathryn?
No, I can't. I can't. I'm just hoping that we can be successful with what we're trying to do right now.
Sure, sure. No, that's great. Very interesting. any other, we talked about or promoted the program as historic preservation and interpretation. So any surprises that you learned when researching or just through this whole process of collaboration?
What I've learned is that the interest is in our community, and however it costs money to do things. So it's I think the first most important part that I see is to, number one, see if the interpretive sign that was put in front of the Lincoln colored home can be returned, because it's still like it. So now it's like it was when I first moved in the community. What is it? But the interpretive sign was removed, and I really don't know why. So unless you know that's what it is, you wouldn't know what it is.
Yeah. And I think that's one good thing about having this collaboration of people knowledgeable about different places and different aspects of the community and preservation, is that we can share information. These signs are a good example. The Taylor House has a sign in front, the firehouse, of course, and now the sign that's missing, to our consternation. All had that in common, tied them together, and was one way for people to begin learning, recognizing these places. And there's a lot we can gain from each other, and always collaborating with others. There are ways to do more than working individually, I believe.
Right. So.
All right. Well, on that note, that's a good place to wrap it up. So thank you so much.
Thank you. You guys did a great job.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yes, and we're very excited to see what comes of the project, and the society will be excited to share information about your events and your tour and your brochure when it comes along in the spring and summer.
All right then. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us today.